To slay in her name is our greatest service. To die in her name is our last act of reverence. Welcome back and well met to those of you joining us for the first time at the fire for this continuation of the Sunday Baldur's Gate 3 lore series, bringing us up to the game's official release. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the Gith race, so the Githyanki and the Githzerai, as not only do we have a Githyanki origin/companion character, and the Githyanki is a playable race in the game, but also the plot of Baldur's Gate 3 may have some significant ties to this race, but don't worry, no spoilers in this video. Alright, sit back, relax, and enjoy the fire. When I use the term Gith in this video, I'm referring to the race as a whole, as the Gith did split into two sub-races, the Githyanki and the Githzerai, but more on that later in the video. So the Gith are a race of alien-looking humanoid creatures that have a rather emaciated but intimidating appearance. Long ago in the history of the realms, the Gith were enslaved by mind flayers in the astral sea for countless generations. There's not much known history about the Gith prior to their enslavement, so their true origin is left to theoretical debate, with some believing them to be descendants of humans. The Mind Flayers mentally dominated the Gith, forcing them to work as the backbone of their vast Illithid empire. Over the course of several millennia, the Gith were transformed through the Mind Flayers' selective breeding processes and genetic experiments, and this is one of the reasons why, if you were to play as a Githyanki in Baldur's Gate 3, this racial choice comes with a few psionic racial features, such as Mage Hand, Jump, and even Misty Step. What happened to the Gith race is similar to what happened to the dwarves that were imprisoned by Mind Flayers in the Underdark of Faerun, as this enslavement over time turned these dwarves into the Duergar, or the Grey Dwarves, who also have a few psionic powers that other subraces of dwarves do not inherently have. Over the course of the Gith's enslavement, they would develop a level of mental resistance to their Mind Flayer masters, and because of this they began to form several rebellious factions. This eventually led to a massive rebellion that caused the fall of the Illithid Empire. The Gith had freed themselves, but they were still far from living a life of peace and content. Philosophical differences within the race would lead to internal conflict, and the Gith would go on to split into two, the Githyanki and the Githzerai. One of the leaders of this successful rebellion, who goes by the name of Gith, I know, a little confusing, was filled with a deep and almost uncontrollable feeling of vengeance, and she advocated for a campaign of pursuing total annihilation of the Mind Flayer race, and also the subsequent destruction of any race that could potentially enslave them in the future. This vengeance campaign, although supported by many, would also turn some away. There was a faction within the Gith society that fostered for peace and argued that their race should focus on rebuilding their society in seclusion, rather than seeking out more conflict. This faction was known as the Githzerai, and was led by Zerthaman, and they felt so strongly about their beliefs that they began to undermine Gith's war efforts. This would be the start of a long civil war, which caused the true separation of the Gith into the Githyanki led by Gith, and the Githzerai led by Zerthaman. Zerthaman was killed in this war, and the Githzerai would end up retreating to the plane of existence known as Limbo, while the Githyanki would go on to move to the astral plane. The Githyanki developed a deep hatred for the Githzerai, as they felt that letting the surviving Mind Flayers retreat to isolated subterranean strongholds was a betrayal to their own race, but this did not stop them from continuing their campaign of total annihilation. Many years after the Githyanki's moved to the astral plane, Gith's advisor, Vlaakith, encouraged Gith to search for allies in the outer planes of existence to aid in their war efforts. In particular, Vlaakith suggested Tiamat, the evil goddess dragon of greed. Gith would agree with this plan and would go on to seek an audience with Tiamat, but Gith did not return to the Githyanki. Rather, a red dragon messenger did, with a pledge from Tiamat stating that all red dragons would now be allies to the Githyanki, and that a small contingent of red dragons would serve them as steeds. In the Baldur's Gate 3 intro cinematic, we get to see Githyanki riding on the backs of red dragons, pursuing the Mind Flayer Nautiloid ship that our character is being held captive on. This red dragon messenger also decreed that Vlaakith and all of her descendants would now rule the Githyanki in place of Gith. It's quite the unknown mystery there as to what happened to Gith. Perhaps we'll learn more about it in BG3. But regardless, Vlaakith and her descendants were now the rulers of this race. The Githyanki, under Vlaakith's rule in their new alliance with the Red Dragons, would continue on with their campaign to seek out and destroy any and every mind flayer that could be found in the realms. In modern-day Forgotten Realms, it is Vlaakith the 157th, who was the first of her line to follow the path of lichdom. Vlaakith was an extremely powerful, mad lich wizard who trained herself in the arts of necromancy and transmutation. She fed off the souls of her knights and would end up being given the title of the Lich Queen. Vlaakith always wanted more though, and she would begin to seek a path to divinity. After instilling a caste of priests into Githyanki society to encourage her worship, and also forming an inquisitor caste to hunt down and kill those who thought of her as a mad tyrant, Vlaakith became viewed by many as a goddess, but we're not even sure yet if she has successfully found a path to becoming divine. What people perceive to be their reality is in fact their own reality. You'll hear several mentions of Vlaakith in Baldur's Gate 3, and for all we know, she could even be a major player in the plot. Now let's take a look at Githyanki society. The society as a whole was extremely well organized and orderly and militaristic, and it was divided into three main castes, with the military on top, those who engage in the arts of the crafts in the middle, and the laborers on the bottom. The Githyanki military hierarchy was divided into companies of 10 warriors, each led by a Sarth, and Sarths were commanded by what the Githyanki call the Kithrak, and the Kithrak are also Red Dragon riders, and the Kithrak are led by a supreme commander. There's also knights in the Githyanki society that actually stand outside of the military hierarchy, and these knights are among the most influential Githyankis in Githyanki society. Knights wield their signature silver swords, which not only damage opponents' bodies and minds alike, but these swords are also capable of severing the silver cords that connect the soul of a traveler using the astral projection spell to their body in the material plane. I should also note here that the Githyanki that hone their psionic skills are referred to as Gish. You will see these military titles in Baldur's Gate 3. On the astral plane, the Githyanki inhabit numerous fortresses and cities constructed from material imported from other planes of existence. The most notable city is that of Tu Narath, which was built upon the body of a long-dead six-armed deity. It's important to note that in the astral plane, the effects of time are slowed to an almost stop, and therefore aging and hunger is not really a thing. And this is why the Githyanki have formed creches on the material plane, and creches are hatching and training grounds for young Githyanki. These training programs are as brutal as you can get, and they consist of harsh combat practice accompanied with severe punishments. You'll hear of and possibly experience a few Githyanki creches in Baldur's Gate 3. Creche Kalir is located on Stardock, which is an asteroid that is part of the Tears of Selûne asteroid cluster that can be seen in the sky from Faerûn. And since I just mentioned Selûne, the goddess of the moon, a few of you have been correcting me on my pronunciation. The pronunciation that I use for these videos is from the game itself.
I never knew Selûne's followers were quite so wretched.
I think it's best to use the pronunciation used in the game so people can put the two and two together. There's also a known creche located somewhere in the mountain pass between the cities of Baldur's Gate and Elturel. During a young Githyanki's training, they are of course told tales of Vlaakith and her immortal warriors, and most of these Githyanki enter into adulthood with the sole purpose of wanting to serve their queen. At the conclusion of a Githyanki's training, they must complete their rite of passage in order to be accepted into adult society. The task here was to slay a mind flayer and bring its head to their queen, Vlaakith. Now, the Githyanki at large do have a xenophobic culture, and they tend to view the material plane as their own garden, a place where they can loot and plunder at will. Very similar to Viking culture, I would say, and therefore Githyanki on the material plane are oftentimes greatly feared and met with acts of violence.